This film demonstrates ground handling and takeoff procedures of lighter-than-air ships. It shows how operational orders and signals are executed by the ground handling crew. The K-type airship patrols for submarines and mines, escorts convoys, and performs rescue work and special missions. In reconnaissance or attack, lighter-than aircraft may vary their speeds from 0 to 70 knots. Because the ship must be on patrol for the entire daylight period, ground handling for lighter-than-air has become largely a night operation. However, night and day procedures are similar. Under most weather conditions, an airship is the best means of maintaining sustained search for submarines. The K-type airship is 256 feet long, approximately as long as a city block. Its height is 75 feet, higher than a 6-story building. The diameter of the envelope is 57 feet. Its volume is about 416,000 cubic feet. It is powered by two 550 horsepower Pratt & Whitney geared engines, driving 12 1/2-foot, 3-bladed propellers. Fueling.
Stand by to fuel ship.
Caution must be used in the high-octane fueling operation. The mechanic in the ship adjusts the valves on the tanks. The fuel truck is kept clear of the ship's car, ahead or astern. The ground wire is attached. The fire extinguisher is manned. All power switches are cut off in the airship. The hose is connected.
Start pumping.
The metering gauge on the truck is checked. The pump is stopped. The hose and ground wire disconnected, and the truck is cleared. In the handling of lighter-than-air ships, the two vital factors are the men and the lines. These lines control all movement of the ship while it is on the ground. First, let us identify the lines. The mooring pendant secures the ship to its mast. Short lines. Tail lines. Quarter lines, long lines. The proper handling of these lines is of the utmost importance in takeoff operations. Hangar weigh-off, ship heavy. The ship is now weighed off in the hangar.
Lines in hand. Slack your lines.
The purpose of the weigh-off is to learn the weight or static condition of a ship, also its trim, fore and aft.
2 men left.
Those 50-pound iron weights and bags of sand are there to represent temporarily the weight of the flight crew and to keep the ship approximately 100 pounds heavy while docked in the hangar.
4 men left. Hold. 4 men can just lift. 600 pounds heavy.
The men lifting give an approximate weigh-off. The loadometer records the actual weight of the ship, necessary knowledge for the ground handling officer and the pilot before the takeoff. The car wires are then secured to the deck of the hangar.
Secure your lines.
Hangar weigh-off, ship light. Another method of hangar weigh-off is followed when the condition of the ship is light.
Hang on 3 weights.
Each weight or sandbag adds about 50 pounds to the ship's heaviness.
Ship in equilibrium. Secure your lines.
The total weight of the ship is 18,000 pounds. It can lift an additional 9,000 pounds. Placing the ship on the mast. To expedite the handling on the ground of these immense airships, a movable mooring mast of heavy structural steel is used. Reaching his position, the mast man immediately fastens his safety belt. On top, there is a cup, which swivels and tilts to receive the spindle cone fastened on the bow of the airship. The mast is towed by a tractor. Here, the tractor is backed up to the mast. The coupling pin is placed. The safety wheel blocks removed. Brought to the hangar, the mast is stopped about 20 feet from the ship.
Stand by to put the ship on the mast. Ready aft? Ready aft, sir. Lines in hand. Short lines tend aft. Long lines abreast the ship. Walk the ship ahead slowly. Hold.
The mooring pendant, which is attached to the spindle on the nose of the ship, is then connected to the hauling in line on the mast. In the hangar, manpower is used instead of a winch to haul in the line.
Take the nose to port.
The linemen control the port and starboard position of the ship's bow.
Take the nose to starboard. Check your way. Up on the bow.
The car party lifts up, raising the bow to meet the mast.
Down on the bow. Locked and cupped.
With the spindle locked in the mast cup, the end of the ship's mooring pendant is secured by a pelican hook to the bottle screw on the mast.
Connect. Connected, sir. Long lines in.
With the ship placed on the mast, the long lines are secured in their compartment in the ship.
Hang on 8 weights.
These weights provide ballast until the crew embarks. When the ship is secured to the mast, the next step in the takeoff is starting and warming engines. Under the supervision of the safety officer, the safety line is secured to the car. Upon word from the flight officer that the airship is going to fly, the rigger and the mechanic warm up the engines. They also make a last-minute check of major controls and all instruments. The fire extinguisher is manned and should be at hand at all times while the engines are tuning up. It takes 10 minutes for a proper warm-up, except in severe weather, when a longer period is required. A safety crew is always on board while the engines are running.
Stand clear of props. Start the engines.
Now it is of the utmost importance that the ground handling crew take every precaution against being drawn into or running into the propellers. That red line is the extreme margin of safety. Don't go beyond it at any time. Beware of the propeller. It won't stop for you. Embarkation of crew. The engines now warmed, the airship is put in trim. The ground handling officer orders aboard the pilot, co-pilot, and flight crew. These men take with them provisions, carrier pigeons, and other necessary equipment. As their weight is added to the ship, the corresponding ballasting bags and 50-pound irons are removed from the car rail. Undocking, taking the ship out of the hangar en mast. The pilot indicates his readiness. Taking the ship out of the hangar becomes a serious problem in the face of wind currents and atmospheric turbulence that may exist at the hangar entrance. Supplementary aerological reports are taken for last-minute check of local conditions. Direction of wind and velocity are especially noted.
Walk the ship ahead. Hold the tail to starboard. Steady as you go.
Care must be taken. All lines held taut. The mast heads for the windward side of the hangar. The chief petty officer and the crew on the tail lines point the ship into the wind as nearly as possible in order that the stern will clear the hangar entrance. The number of men and their disposition on the tail lines are governed by the wind conditions that must be met. Clear of the hangar, the tail lines are disconnected, coiled, and secured on the field truck. The tail line party now comes up and takes the short and long lines.
Let the ship swing into the wind.
Walking the ship out to the takeoff area. The airship is moved by the ground handling crew to a point on the field selected by the ground handling officer. This position should be free from obstruction for several hundred yards in order to provide space for the takeoff and to avoid air turbulence in the hangar area. The ship is walked across the field with bow to windward. The men of the crew maintain their relative positions. The ground handling officer again checks the wind direction and velocity by observing the aerological instruments and field flags. The ship is at the proper position for the takeoff. Unmasking, taking the ship off the mast.
Stand by to take the ship off the mast.
The ground handling officer acknowledges the pilot's signal by clapping hands.
Short lines tend aft. Check your trim. Trim okay. Back on the car. Clear the mast. Wire, stand clear of the wire. Hold.
Field way off. The final way off determines any change in trim from conditions in the hangar.
Stand by for way off. Hands off. Slack your lines. Hold.
The pilot clears the engines individually on signal from the ground handling officer. While clearing the engines, the pilot corrects the trim of the ship by pumping air into the proper ballonet. When the trim is corrected, the pilot signals ready for way off. Another way off is for takeoff.
Out abreast on the short lines. Clear the car.
The ground handling officer signals to the pilot with both hands rotating to turn up engines. As the ship starts moving ahead,
Let go starboard. Let go port. Let go.
the ground crew clears the car. The handling lines are released. The pilot opens up his engines, and the ship moves faster down the runway directly into the wind. The elevators move as the pilot takes her off the wheel like an airplane. The ground drops away. The ship has taken to the air. After the takeoff, the duties of the ground handling party are finished.